And it was yesterday, the 23rd of January in 2022, that I finished Gideon the Ninth, the audiobook, because I moved in yesterday and I started this audiobook because I didn't want to read any of the physical books I had back at home. So I read that, and it happened. I do have a lot of things to say, in a way, but the majority of things I have to say are going to be non-spoiler. But even before I start talking about this book, I want to talk about the other book I was talking about, Journeyer. I actually don't have it with me. Otherwise I'd be like, woo, Journeyer. No. So I did read Roof of the World, and I already forgot what it was. What was that chapter? I don't think it was Kitai. Kitai's the one after. It's the... No, maybe Kanbalik is after. Anyway, I read the chapter before Roof of the World, and then I read Roof of the World. I did it. I made it halfway through the book, basically. But upon making it halfway through the book, I decided I am going to set it aside for a while. At least a while. My dad's the one who gave it to me, and just... Obviously, it's been a year and multiple months that I've been struggling to read that book. In part, it's because I would prefer to read other books in that time. The pacing of Journeyer is... to put it bluntly, at least to me personally, and it doesn't hold most of what I value in reading. It has very interesting things, especially with the historical aspects, why I like historical fiction, but it can go very slow, and it doesn't really have, like, themes at all, because it's all about Marco Polo and whatever. And I didn't like the main character. So, we're back. We're gonna set Journeyer aside till a later day if I ever want to pick it up again, or if I'm just gonna shrug. I honestly don't think I'll be reading Gary Jennings' like famous books, because Gary Jennings is the author of Journeyer. I don't think I'll be reading Gary Jennings' Aztec series, which is his famous series, because I don't think that's my taste. So, shrug. Maybe we'll see, but I'm good. For now, I'm good. So, I set Journeyer aside after reading the 2 more chapters. I gave it a try, and I decided that I couldn't tough my way through the rest. And then I reread Codex Alera, and then, because I didn't really have much else to read without starting a brand new series, technically this is a brand new series, but we'll get into that, I started the audiobook my friend gifted me, the Locked Tomb trilogy. I hear people say trilogy, so I assume it will be a trilogy. There's only 2 books out. I do have the second book, I'll have you know, if I can get it out of my shelf. There we go. I do have the second book in physical, because I do actually prefer physical. So yeah. I don't think that there's been announcements about the 3rd book. Not that I know of. I mean, I'll look. But yeah. I finished this. Non-spoilers. Here we go. I want to start this off by saying that compared to a lot of what I've been reading over the last 2 years, first of all, this was different in a lot of ways. And maybe it didn't have as much of what I love, right? Maybe it didn't have as much of, like, what makes me go, constantly. But I will say, though, that I had some shocks. There was a lot of, what's the word? References? Allusions? Linkages? There were a lot of things that echoed things that I have liked. But it's just that there were multiple of those and they didn't go deep. I don't know if that makes sense. So I'll repeat myself one more time. There were multiple things that I liked and things that I recognized that I have loved in other series. But while those other series will just dig deep into those, I believe Gideon the Ninth just scattered a bunch of those. It had a lot of them, but none of them went all that deep. And I think another part of it is that, this is the second book. This is the second book, and it's just a lot smaller than I've been reading recently. So maybe that's it. Maybe I'm just used to having so much to take in that having a book that's a little bit shorter is kind of throwing me off a bit. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's what I think. Perhaps. Perhaps. I don't really know. So there is that. Along the same lines, no fault to the author. This is a me thing, and it's all about personal preference, as always. But I've always been bad with those big scale, 1-on-1 or 2-on-1 or 2-on-2 fights, where it's just some higher power kind of fight. I'm always bad at those. It happened with even Hero of Ages. I believe I complained about it with Hero of Ages. Hero of Ages is an amazing book, but that doesn't mean that the fights had my attention. It was the everything else, right? So I still feel the exact same way with other books. The end of First Lord's Fury, I thought the same. And that's how I feel with Gideon the Ninth. Most of the big fights just don't hit for me, and I'm sorry, but that's just one of the things that I actually am not all that attached to. Maybe it's because I didn't start as a fantasy reader. I started as mystery and historical fiction. So maybe that's why. But it's just not something that really catches my attention. So I wanted to mention that's a personal preference thing. Along the same lines, on the other side, is that I do love mystery. And this book had a lot of puzzles, and a lot of mystery aspects and stuff. There's investigations, there's clues and hints and secrecy. There's secrecy both with the characters and with the building, and that's always fun. It's when you have to explore this fast building with all these different secret passageways and stuff. That's pretty cool, and I always loved that. So I loved that aspect. That was really cool, and I definitely was always curious whenever we were exploring a new area or learning something new. Whoops. Or getting more hints. Very fun. Do like. What does that say? God, I can't even read my own handwriting. Oh, God, I'm stupid. Okay. I've already mentioned a lot of books. Other books, I've mentioned Hero of Ages, I've mentioned First Lord's Fury. Ow, my finger. In my head, I've been scrolling through all the different series I know. And there's two things I want to comment on. One is that I'm going to very iffily, I know that's not a word, but let's just pretend for a minute, iffily relate this to Traitor's Blade. Now, if you don't know my perspective on Traitor's Blade was a very interesting book, and it had a lot of different interesting aspects. It didn't really go all that deep into things. In fact, Traitor's Blade is probably one of the shortest books I've read in the last few years that wasn't assigned for school. It was very small. I read it in a day and a half or something. Anyway, I liked a lot about Traitor's Blade, and you know, it was kind of the end. It didn't, like, the story didn't pull together well, kind of thing. I am not saying that Gideon the Ninth didn't pull its ending together well, but I am saying that it's less that it didn't pull together well, but it's more that it didn't... It didn't hit for me, personally. It was kind of the path it took. It's like I was expecting one path with the like enemies, the big antagonist, I guess is the way I can put it. I was expecting the big antagonist to go like one way. I was expecting them to like follow the pattern of the rest of the book. But instead, it came out the opposite, where the main antagonist was kind of leading the entire book on, and there weren't really hints to that. You couldn't guess that, is what I'm trying to say, kind of thing. And that's part of mystery reader me, wanting to be able to see the path. And I'm sure that this is one of those kinds of things that you reread the book and you're like, whoa, kind of. But on the first read, it's a little, possibly, depends on the people, for me though, a little jarring, because it's like you see all these hints and you're trying to piece it together, and then there's this thing that you probably could have never guessed ever turns out to be most of what's happening. So I'm linking this to Traitor's Blade, and that Traitor's Blade kind of had the same path. It's like there was clues and hints, and there were all these things we're trying to figure out, and then there was this one factor that came in that kind of threw my investigation off. So I just want to comment on that. It's not a bad thing, and again, maybe I'm picky. It's entirely possible I'm picky, but that is something I thought while I was reading it, is that I was like, it's kind of one of those factors. It's just one of those things that was a little sudden to me. And I comment on sudden things, if you haven't noticed. And it's also, again, I don't mean this in a bad way, it depends on the reader. Some readers are just there to have fun. I keep track of motives, and sometimes when you're in a new world and you're meeting the characters for the first time, first book of Locked Tomb, first book of Greatcoats, Traitor's Blade, you don't understand people's motives. You don't understand how they think. So a lot of it can go wee until you read the rest of the series and come back. So again, I think that's what's happening. Right. I've always been a character person. We've probably noticed that a lot recently with the amount I've been screaming characters' names. Thomas. And there are really 3 characters that stood out in this to me, and otherwise, again, it might be because it's such a short book and I'm used to like seeing more happen and like being able to see characters more. We actually didn't even see Harrow that much in this book. She was always off somewhere else, even though she's a main character. So I did get attached to 3 characters: Gideon, Harrow, and Palamides. I really liked Palamides. He was awesome. Yay. But all of them, even though it's in Gideon's perspective too, I want to say more. I like eat up the time we get with each character, and even with Gideon, being in Gideon's perspective, there were times that Gideon wasn't paying the most attention to the world around her, and she's very funny, the way she talks. There's a lot of banter, and, what's the word? I used it yesterday. Snark. A lot of banter and snark, with Gideon. But there's also a lot of Gideon just being confused and not know what's going on, and, like, commenting that she has no idea what's going on, and just following Harrow or Palamides or these other people around. They're telling her to go do something. Until the end. In the end, it's pretty good with Gideon, but that's something I noticed, is that we never really dug all that deep into any of them, really. There was an emotional moment between Harrow and Gideon that was, yes. But aside from that moment standing out, I can't really pick one or another that really highlighted that, if that makes sense. Another thing I had to note. Alright. Earlier I said I was going to mention 2 things, and then I only mentioned 1 thing because I'm stupid. So let's go back to that second thing that surprised me about this book. It's horror. I did not know it was horror. I read fantasy and I read sci-fi, and I was like, okay, it's fantasy sci-fi, and that's it. And I mean, you know, the fact that there's necromancy would usually give you a clue that it's horror. But for some reason that didn't occur to me. So, the middle of the book, when the horror thing happened, I was shocked. I was not ready. I was like, whoa. So, that was a very interesting experience. I've never read a horror book before, really, technically. At least not to its full. So, that was new. I accidentally came across something new. And it definitely brought up the intensity a lot in the book. Like, a lot. And I was, like, on my toes for quite a while afterward, like, waiting for, like, something, like, the same thing to happen again, or something even worse than that to happen again. And maybe it didn't happen, but even if it didn't, it still was a moment that will stay in my head for a while. That was very moment. Don't really know what else to say there. I'm a little surprised that people try to label this under YA. I will say that. A little surprised. Oh, I also wrote here that the ending reminded me of Crimson Campaign, referencing even another book that I've read recently. And the reason that the ending felt like Crimson Campaign is that there's just so much going on. So much power, so much like, oh my goodness, how do I even interpret what's happening, kind of thing. And so that's another comment about the big fight thing that my brain's like, with sometimes. Alright, that's most of it. I said that Gideon's hilarious, with their snark and comments. And I already said I like calamities. I really don't have really any spoilers. Like, I could end it here, and I'm just going to repeat myself in spoilers, except saying what actually happened. Let me think about it for a second. We'll do spoilers. We'll do very speedy spoilers. So, spoilers time. This is your time to leave. Though I know that only Red's watching this video, so it's kind of pointless. Spoilers. Yay. Let's choose 4 scenes. Let's just go with 4 scenes. Alright, 4 scenes. Number 1, Calamity's figuring it all out. Turns out Calamity's was, like, super uber duper smart, and I really wish I could see the, like, logic and thinking, like, the puzzling everything together that Harrow and Calamity is, and apparently the 3rd house had the entire time. Very interesting. I also wanted to know more about the houses. You know, we get to learn these different, how do you say that word, facets between them, like their specialties and some of how the houses work, but you know, you never got to see them, or really Gideon never actually, like, knew much, or if anything, about house politics, and because we're in Gideon's perspective, it's kind of a limitation, right? So I am very intrigued about that, and I wonder if there's more information there. So that would be number 1. But also, Calamities is, like, epic moment. It's not really an epic moment, but moment where he stops Gideon, goes in, and says, like, he knows everything, and he, like, lays out all the things. This is very interesting, and it also shows a lot about his, like, emotions and development and stuff. So, amazing character. Did like him a lot. I can't really tell you what he reminded me of. He reminded me of someone, and I still haven't put a face to what he reminds me of. Number 2, horror scene. Never saw that coming. I totally thought Gideon and... I'm gonna pretend like I know her name. I'm sorry. The teenager girl that was the Cavalier of Isaac. I remember Isaac. I don't remember her. The one that's the Cavalier of Isaac, I totally thought they were safe, 100%. So when Gideon woke up, I was like, ooh! That was scary. I did not see that coming. With Crimson Campaign and just all of the Powder Mates trilogy, I talked about how I was iffy with time skips because I feel there could be content in that time skip. That was one of those right there, was when Gideon woke up and saw the horror thing that happened and was like, oh my god. And then it time skipped to way later after everybody found out, and I guess Gideon explained what happened to Harrow and people, and there was already a funeral and everything. I feel there could have been content in there. I get why. It makes total sense that Gideon would just space out after that. 100%. But I still like knowledge. Time skips are just like a thing to me. Another preference. Not everybody feels that way. So that's number 2. Number 3 will be Harrow and Gideon talking in a saltwater pool. The person who recommended me this book agrees that sometimes things aren't explained and sometimes it's a little confusing. Why they need to be in salt water. Why does Harrow call Gideon Griddle? Doesn't really make all that much sense. Even if it was like a nickname, it doesn't really match Gideon. That'd be like Giddy, or like something like that, right? Shrug. I don't know. Maybe it'll be explained, maybe it won't. Who knows? But anyway, that saltwater scene where Harrow is explaining everything that Harrow knows to Gideon is kind of maybe the most emotionally vulnerable the characters ever get. But very interesting. And part of that might entirely be because of the kind of world, universe, because they're in a solar system they're in. That's just kind of how things are for them, especially since they both grew up in very precarious setting. The only 3 children in the entire 9th. It's kind of scary. So, yep. That was definitely an interesting reveal. And I was, the entire time. Number 4 will be the ending, like the epilogue kind of ending. I'm a little tiny bit confused. There's a lot of things that I'm a little tiny bit confused about with this series. I did have to go back and re-listen to multiple sections, but that's because I don't audiobook. I like physical books. So I did have to do that a few times to like understand what was actually happening. But there's also just all those details that still leave me confused. The one that stood out to me at the end, with the epilogue, was that while the other 2 lictors could still access their Cavalier as lictors, for some reason Harrow couldn't after she woke up. That confuses me, because whatever her name, and Calanthe is Witcher. It's not Calanthe, it's, oh my goodness. Okay, well, there was some lictor that started with the C that was very, very old, and then there was the brand new lictor that started with an I, who was the pretty twin. Both of them still had, like, their Cavalier guiding their arms or helping them or having worked with them for years and years and years and years and years. And Harrow gets Gideon as the Cavalier to lead her for the one fight, which apparently suddenly became super easy. Again, I'm not a fight scene person, or a big fight scene person, so I should say I do enjoy fight scenes, but that kind, not really. But when Harrow woke up, Gideon just wasn't there, even though Harrow still licked her. So that confused me. I'm going to ask my friend about it. I haven't asked yet because they were tired last night and I didn't want to bother them. So, shrug. But, yeah, there's just a lot of confusing aspects. I still don't understand some motives, but I am relatively confident that a lot of it gets explained in the second book. One of the things I noticed is that Gideon could kind of stand alone in its own way. It kind of stands alone in the way that the second season, the first and second and third, bear with me, the first, second, and third season of Castlevania can stand alone, but there's still a fourth season to tie up all the loose ends. It's kind of I think it's kind of the same here, where it's like, Gideon could stand alone, but I feel like the rest of the series is going to tie up the loose ends, explain more, and introduce more conflicts, and probably touch on what is in the locked tomb, which I think Gideon is the one in the locked tomb. Fourth wall break. Dun-dun-dun. I do think that, though. That's my theory, is that Gideon is the one in the locked tomb, which is what makes everything very complicated. One wonders how that is possible. Maybe the next books will explain. But, yeah, so. Ow! I deserve that. Alright, so that was Gideon the Ninth. Has a pretty cool cover. And Gideon was a pretty cool person. Do want to know more about Harrow. And given that this book is called Harrow. So, as for books that are next, I said I was going to read... I should have wrote these down before. Whoops. I said I was going to read these. And I am, hopefully, since they are relatively small. Bands of Mourning is starting to get a little big. I'm trying to remember, I think this is the order. Alloy of Law, and then Shadows of Self, and then Bands of Mourning. I think that's the order. After I read Secret History, and I do have Secret History, it's right there, don't worry. But I'll read Secret History, and then read these. Just to get back into this world again, get back into some more Sanderson, and then I'll take a break from Sanderson for a long time again, because I am terrified of reading the rest. I could read Warbreaker, I guess. Era 2, and then Warbreaker. And then I will get into Stormlight Archive, which terrifies me. Stormlight Archive is scary. Anyway, these are next. I don't know where this is on my schedule. It's somewhere. I just bought the book recently, so I don't know how to plan for it. Shrug. I am hoping to start The Expanse soon, now that I have 3 books. I'm debating getting the 4th one, but maybe I'm waiting until I read the first 2 before I get the 4th. If it becomes like Dresden, where I read all the books way too fast, then I'm going to regret that, but if I read them slow, then it's okay. So we'll see, I guess. I am going to postpone First Law, since this kind of touched into the what I was saving. This is going to make no sense, but like, since First Law is so like dark and grimdark, it's grimdark genre, this kind of Locked Tomb kind of like touched into the energy I was saving for that. So I'm going to push it a little bit further until I'm ready. And I'm going to finish reading the novellas. I've started reading Brian McClellan's novellas for the Powder Mage world. And I think about 2/3 through the novellas, it gets into the sequel series, which is a sequel series, not prequel series. I'm sorry every time I said prequel series. I might read those, maybe. It's the same size as the main series, but since it's after, I think it'll be very interesting with which characters are gone, but some characters are still there, and I think it'll be interesting. So that might be somewhere on the horizon, but maybe not anywhere soon. Whoops. We got these 3 first, though. So, yep, these are next. And then I don't think I bought any new books. I think I showed you guys all the new books I got when I finished Autumn Republic. As far as I'm aware. Unless I got this afterward. I don't think I did, though. I don't think so. So, that's all I got. Thank you. I'll see y'all after Mistborn Era 2.